All right. Okay, so we'll kind of get some of the administrative stuff out of the way. Like I mentioned to some of the earlier arrivers, Q&A. Go ahead and drop your questions in there as we go through the presentation. Robin's going to kind of help me look at those, and if they're relevant, she's going to kind of interrupt me, and we'll take a look at those questions, and we'll talk to them directly right off the bat. If for whatever reason they're just kind of like more general questions, or if you've got sort of more strategic questions, we'll start to queue some of those up, and we'll have a little bit of a Q&A towards the end of the presentation. Chat's available as well. You can chat in there, tell us that you can hear the audio and video. That'd be super helpful. And then just kind of an overview of sort of what we're going to cover today. Unlike a lot of sort of PPC webinars, we're not going to go deep into kind of the how-tos of PPC. This is meant to be more of a strategic sort of conversation for marketing directors, sales directors, to understand how you can introduce PPC and specifically Google Ads into your overall marketing and consumer direct strategy. So as a result of that, we're going to kind of cover, get my thing to advance. Controls are not. So in particular, we're going to kind of, again, look at this from a strategic point of view. We're going to talk about sort of how to bring this into your consumer direct strategy, the things you need to know about Google Ads, how it can help you, what to expect from it. Then we're also going to talk about sort of what role it plays into your overall mix of advertising and marketing tactics. We're also going to kind of teach you or help you to be able to interact and talk with your PPC manager or your agency who's probably doing this on behalf of you. This is a really important piece because a lot of times when you engage a PPC strategy or you're talking with a PPC manager, you're going to be highly skilled at the actual sort of art and science of running Google Ads and running PPC campaigns, but they may not have as much domain knowledge as you do, or they may not be considering some of the other marketing inputs that you're getting, or maybe some of the other marketing research that you're doing in order to make those campaigns work. And a lot of that information can be really useful to the PPC manager. So we're going to kind of talk about how to spark some of that creativity in your PPC manager or your agency to make sure that you're getting the types of leads that you expect, and then hopefully driving it to a cost that makes sense from an ROI perspective. So what is pay-per-click advertising? So quite specifically, it in and of itself is a marketplace, right? And it allows you to go into the search engines, and again, a lot of this is going to be specific to Google Ads, but it allows you to go into the search engines and actually position your company, your advertising in front of people that are doing specific searches for your product types, scenarios, and pain points that you can help with. Potentially solutions like your own, maybe even to some degree, sort of competitive things that they've seen. And so as a result, they're being sparked to go in there, to do some research, to use the search engine as a part of that. And you're, by design, positioning, by paying for that position, you're positioning yourself into those searches. A lot of people kind of have heard about that, understand it, maybe they've seen it in the Google search, but they don't really think about sort of that full journey. When we do PPC or we do Google Ads, ultimately we're wanting to generate a lead. But so often our understanding of PPC sort of stops there. Oh, I want to get myself, on an ad in that particular search for that particular keyword. But I don't think about, okay, what does it take to get a click? What does it take to get a good volume of clicks? What does it take to get an affordable click? Then once I actually get that click, they land on my website, or ideally my landing page. What does it actually take to get them to engage with me so that I can have a sales conversation? What does it take for them to fill out the form? What does it take for them to pick up their phone and call, or more likely, they're actually already on their mobile phone and just be able to actually punch and click that phone number and generate that inbound? So this is kind of what pay-per-click or PPC should have kind of that broader understanding. And then the most important, kind of this last sort of sentence here is really important. A lot of people don't understand this as well. It's a marketplace, right? You're essentially bidding to get into those positions. There's a lot of market dynamics that goes into this as well. And most honestly, actually affects the pricing and what you end up paying for that click, but ultimately that lead. So when do you use, let me get some controls out of the way here. So when is PPC used? So again, whenever we're talking about marketing strategy, or probably you're running some other campaigns, the role that PPC fills is usually to augment some additional marketing that you're doing. And the sort of the unique role, or the best place to use PPC, is when you're trying to generate leads immediately, right? So you're actually trying to get that jump start, or you're trying to create predictable, sustainable, consistent lead generation. PPC can be a big component that should be added in. If you're doing SEO or you're doing email marketing, those don't necessarily have the same consistency, right? So just to kind of juxtaposition those against some other sort of strategies, if you're doing SEO and content, you're publishing content, you're waiting for that content to be indexed, hopefully preferred by Google, positioned into that search. So there's a time factor there. Plus, a good percentage of that content and even that SEO strategy that you're running is just simply not going to work. You're essentially putting things into the black box, and there's no sort of guarantee that any of that's gonna work. So you're constantly, there's a sort of a lack of consistency there, right? Same thing with email. When you do an email, even if you've got a highly responsive list, you're really only going to get activity out of that campaign when you blast out the email, or when you send the email to the individual leads, right? So again, there's not kind of a smooth consistency to that. Social media, same sort of thing. You're putting things into the social media algorithm, and there's a lot of reasons where sometimes that does well, sometimes it fades out. There's a lot of sort of inconsistencies here. So the best time and the best place for PPC is really to create some stability and some consistency inside of that lead generation. And then, of course, to create that ultimate consistency, one, of course, you've got to, and you'll start to kind of figure this out as you're running these campaigns, you want to figure out what searches are producing sort of the best results, the most consistent results. That kind of goes to your placement here. And then ultimately, you want to make sure that your landing pages are built in such a way as to get a consistent conversion factor on those. And again, that will sort of smooth out that lead generation process. So again, as we kind of go through there, I encourage you, put some questions into the Q&A, and we'll answer those at the end. Or again, if they're sort of relevant, we'll go ahead and handle some of those as we kind of move through this. So what are the benefits? I kind of spoke to some of those, but it's really important to kind of understand and have good expectations as to what you're getting from PPC. One of the biggest benefits, or sort of a handful of the biggest benefits, are one, you can get results fast. As soon as you start running the campaigns, again, dependent upon sort of the quality and the skill of your PPC manager or your agency, or if you're running these on your own behalf, generally, when you build those campaigns, you publish them into the platform, you start to run them, you start to give Google money, you will get leads instantly. Again, assuming that full journey is sort of intact, right? Landing page works, form submissions kind of work in a good way. Ultimately, again, you're paying for the positioning, you're doing advertising, you'll get immediate results. Even if those results aren't perfect, or you're not getting like the perfect ROI at the beginning, you'll start to quickly get data and feedback that you'll be able to optimize, and then ultimately get to that perfect result. But you will get leads. Again, assuming that you're doing these things properly, you should be expecting leads from your PPC manager, from your PPC campaigns, as soon as you start them. They are cost effective. Again, you're competing in a marketplace. In and of itself, the marketplace kind of gives you perfect price discovery. So the actual cost of that lead, again, there's lots of caveats to that landing page and that actual form that you're using. So that's got to be right? That's a component we're really not going to go too deep into on this webinar, but those have to be right because that's kind of 50% of the equation. But the marketplace itself, the Google Ads, when you're buying into those keywords and you're advertising, you're getting immediate price discovery. So everybody that's in that marketplace competing, it's kind of like the stock market, right? They're actually getting that keyword priced in such a way that it should be profitable, right? If it was not profitable for the large part of that market, then that price would decline, right? Or if it's really profitable and it's really attractive and it's really producing good leads, it's going to drive up for the cost of that. So this is kind of an interesting sort of nuance of any sort of advertising platform that is a marketplace, right? You're getting perfect price discovery. So if you're not getting, it's not cost effective, you're not getting a positive ROI, that means there's some components there that you've got to sort of dig into and optimize. And most probably it's on the conversion piece of that. Could be on the product piece, could be some other things. But generally, you're going to kind of tie that back to the conversion process. There's testing and controlling. This is the other neat kind of thing about this. You can, again, with immediate data feedback and impact, you can go into the marketplace and you can test some different theories. You can test positioning, you can test branding, you can test products, you can actually generate leads for a certain, like we do a lot of mortgage and legal and also senior living. But if we want to test a new loan program and see, hey, can we convert this well? Can we turn this into a profitable sort of program to go after, or profitable type of situation to go after? If we're in senior living and we're looking to sort of test a new market for a new facility, we can run campaigns in there and we can see, what sort of feedback we get in that market and whether or not that market would potentially be good for us to expand into, right? You can do all kinds of targeting, location, time of day, time of week, certain types of scenarios. Again, different industries and different sort of verticals have different rules, even within Google Ads themselves. But again, it's a great way to do some testing. If you're launching a new website, it's a great way to sort of give some initial signals into Google and some other things that will make you successful and just gain some visibility and awareness across that site. All right, so now let's kind of talk into the nitty-gritty of sort of setup and ongoing optimization. This part, again, we're not going to make you a PPC manager, but this part of the webinar will help you to have better conversations with your agency and with your PPC managers, and give you an idea as a marketing leader or a sales leader of where to sort of focus. If things are not going right and you're not getting the ROI you're expecting, or you're not getting the leads you expect, these are some areas where you can kind of dive into and see what we're missing. This is where most of the money is made, in my opinion, right? Is this upfront sort of discovery and research process. This is where a lot of things sort of don't get done. And as a result, will potentially take you longer to get to that positive ROI, or take you longer to get to a high quality lead. It's because some of this work hasn't been done. There's a couple reasons that that's the case. A lot of times, whoever the leader is, or the sponsor of the campaigns, the CMO, the marketing director, the sales director, whoever's sort of driving the initiative to do PPC, probably is not doing enough to collaborate with the PPC manager or the agency to truly define sort of their business objectives. So this discovery process is really important. I encourage you to put it down on paper, write a creative brief. Even if you don't know a lot about PPC, to actually write a creative brief that says, hey, this is my business. This is my business objective. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. These are the type of leads I'm trying to give to my sales force. Maybe a little bit about what our sales process is, a little bit about the product and the programs. That discovery and that conversation can, again, one, it'll inform and sort of bring your PPC manager or your agency up to speed on the domain knowledge part of things. But at the same time, it will start to spark their creativity, right? So they, even if they're in the industry, they probably have familiarity with the keywords and things that work and things don't work and how they structure campaigns and those sorts of things. but giving that extra texture to what you're trying to accomplish within Google Ads will make them a little more creative, and make them sort of stretch a little bit further to find, how to optimize inside of that marketplace, or even as they see things that are happening in the marketplace, because they do give you visibility inside of the tool. They can say, oh, I can see why that's happening, because these people probably want a similar result to what my client wants. So that will also sort of help them get dialed in quicker. Perform keyword research. There is a keyword research tool inside of Google Ads, and a lot of these PPC platforms, there are also tools that are targeted towards building PPC campaigns and those sorts of things. That's probably going to be done in a good way with an expertise with your PPC manager. One way that we've found we can have a lot of additional success is actually using keyword research from other marketing campaigns and other things that we're running. So looking at your Google Analytics and seeing how people are coming to your website and seeing what types of terms are coming in there, using SEO tools. A lot of times I've made a lot of successful sort of expansions of campaigns by going to things like Ahrefs or SEMrush and doing keyword research the way an SEO person would do. Take that research in and the sort of the keywords that I think, hey, these would be great to go after organically, hand that off to my PPC manager, and invariably there is a large sort of Venn diagram where SEO and PPC tools sort of have different keywords, and by blending those together, it really enriches the keywords that you're going after. So using some of those from the SEO tool, you'll be amazed at how many of those keywords that are great ideas just simply are not showing up in that PPC tool for whatever reason. So sort of blending the keyword research, if you're doing other campaigns or you're doing other things that require keywords, looking at competitors, seeing where competitors are showing up, doing competitive research, looking at the types of words that your competitors are using. Again, all kinds of different places where you can gain some keyword research and leverage. Of course, location, this is a way, often when you're going into these marketplaces, you're competing with people like My Perfect Leads, which is our lead generation company. So we're going in there and we're generating leads. And so we've got larger budgets than a lot of our clients on the agency side, on the Kaleido side. And so we can go in there and we can kind of be more aggressive. Large players, like if you're in the mortgage industry, Rocket, or a large legal firm, might have much larger budget, or lead generators. And so you can use location targeting, because you're more interested in maybe those local targets anyway, to sort of navigate around some of the big players who are just doing sort of general across the board nationwide campaigns. So that's a strategy that a lot of people are using, but keep that in mind. Keyword concepts and matching logic. Again, this is where you can explore and you can kind of push your PPC manager and your agency a little bit on these concepts to kind of see what they're doing, and ask them to sort of explain why they're doing certain things, because there's a lot of optimizations that can be done within this. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Keyword variations, just sort of developing different variations and a lot of focus. And again, this is where you should have some conversations with your PPC manager and agency, is really take a look at that negative keyword list and help to develop that negative keyword list. A lot of PPC managers or agencies will have a default set of negatives, where they just know in this particular industry, these are terms that don't necessarily, they may intuitively, or Google may think that there's sort of lead traffic here, but that that's going to produce a poor quality lead, right? So you want to actively be managing that. And if you're working with a PPC manager or an agency that can't show you that negative keyword list, or is not actively sort of adding to it and optimizing that negative as well as the positive, then you probably got some room to improve in a significant way. Like I said, it's an art and science as far as keyword research. And this becomes important because, again, and this changes all the time, where those ads are positioned within search results can vary. And in certain keyword sort of clusters, there are extra features that Google will put on the page that can impact what you're doing on the paid side. So again, ranking on the page, being visible, driving the quality, traffic, understanding the intent behind the actual keywords that you're putting into your campaign is super critical. A lot of keywords, like words in the English language, have kind of maybe counterintuitive actual, the use of that word could actually imply something different, or someone searching for certain things could imply that they're looking for a different type of result. It's also helpful. Now, you can't do this on most campaigns because you're working with hundreds, maybe even thousands of keywords. But if you are doing some extra sort of optimization, or you're looking at a particular cluster of keywords, sometimes it's useful just to put that keyword into a Google search and see what comes back, because Google, for good or bad, is, and this happens in SEO as well, is going to come to an understanding of generally what that search is looking for. And so by looking at what they return, you'll know what the algorithm has already tuned in is probably the best sort of results to show. And you can often find keywords that you think are great keywords, should produce a great lead, and the average searcher has a totally different thing in mind when they put that in there. Right. So that becomes really important to, again, blend some of the science where you're just kind of doing that keyword research at scale, but also sort of taking a deeper look at the art side and thinking about, like, what is that searcher trying to achieve? What is that buyer trying to say? What is the behavior behind that search? So it becomes a really important part of that. This is where kind of the match types get important, right? And you can kind of see some examples here, right? Exact, oftentimes we start to use this when we dialed something in. It was like, hey, this search invariably gives me a perfect lead, right? So you'll start to sort of tighten down Google's ability to use their algorithm. Early on, we're doing some long tail stuff. We're doing some broader match. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, which potentially will give you maybe lower volume in the case of sort of a long tail strategy, like the bottom one you see here. Or it's great for actually getting some negatives out of there, certain things that you don't want to have. Whereas the broad match will bring in a large volume of data and let Google's algorithm start to optimize, and or you to optimize against sort of the data that comes in. Here's a perfect example of sort of what you might find as you're opening these things up. And as you can see, and this again is a good conversation, even if you're not terribly familiar with the PPC, just to walk through with the manager, the PPC manager, the agency, and get to understand why they're doing certain things. You can see in here, there's and these are sort of some actual campaigns that have been run in the past. You can see there's different types of match types, right? Like I said, some of these exact means we probably dialed in on something. Broad was we're just generally collecting data so that we can optimize. You can see cost per conversion is really important. The cost per click can be important, and the click-through rate. So just to kind of understand how to kind of read through this, one, you want to understand the match strategy, right? And the keyword strategy. So this can be a conversation. But as you move through here, things that you can potentially dial in on is, so the click-through rate, that's going to indicate the sort of the quality and the effectiveness of the actual advertising text and the keyword match to that text, right? Is that search, is that ad resonating with that search, right? So higher click-through rates means, hey, that ad is really resonating with people that search for this particular thing. So you can see this one's highlighted. This is an outlier, and outliers are always good to look at because something different is happening there. An exact match, probably dialed in on something low volume, like there's not a ton of people doing this search. However, converting at a really high rate, which can sort of optimize you into a good cost per click. And then ultimately, probably assuming, again, everything on this side, the cost per conversion, is taking into effect the landing page conversion. So there's some other factors in here, but it's going to give you kind of an effective cost here. Whenever you've got something here where we're looking for some outliers, again, looks like we've dialed in on something here. We're getting a pretty effective click-through rate. Just for a rule of thumb, the difference differs by different marketplaces and industries, but generally in the click-through, we're looking for something north of 5% here. Average cost per click, again, outlier here, right? Getting an affordable lead because this cost per click is really low, but in order to produce this low cost per click, there's a couple things that's working. We've got good volume here. We've got a higher than average click-through rate. So this broad match is bringing us a lot of good data. We can look at that data. We've sort of figured, I always kind of think of a gold mine here. We've kind of found a vein of gold here. We may dial in some portion of that broad match into some more exact match. So just give you a feel for some of the types of conversations that I might have with a PPC manager or my agency around this kind of data, and sort of understanding, what is actually affecting the data. Again, click-through rate is going to be your ad, and it's matched to the keyword. Your cost per click is going to be driven largely by the marketplace. And then ultimately your cost per conversion and your conversions are going to be driven by what's happening on the website or the receiving end of that click. When and where to leverage match types. I'm not going to drill too deeply into this, but there's basically sort of three different match types: exact, phrase, and broad. This goes into a lot of the sort of deeper strategy. And usually you're doing things, you're kind of moving from wide to narrow, unless of course you've got some expertise where you've already run some of these. And that's the advantage of going to a niched agency that's maybe worked in the industry that you're already going against, because they will already know a lot of these things. They won't have to spend as much money in broad match in order to bring in all the data that you need to start to optimize down and get a lower cost per click and lower cost per action as you start to sort of dial in the exact. There's also kind of the notion, and again, as with any marketing thing, you're going to get a variety of philosophies, but there's also the notion that Google's algorithm, their ability to sort of give you the best traffic based on how they're optimizing their algorithm. So they're starting to optimize your ad text. They're starting to optimize where they place you. They're starting to optimize how they use the keywords and what matches they do. So there is a philosophy to run broader match a little bit longer, because potentially that will sort of grab all the little nuances of lead traffic that Google has already figured out is sort of optimal for the type of keywords that you're running. When you start to narrow it down with exact and phrase, you're starting to sort of take away the ability for Google's algorithm to sort of run free. And as AI gets better and these algorithms get better, you could actually be disadvantaging yourself. You will certainly be taking out volume in your lead generation and traffic generation efforts. So things to keep in mind. Setting up the campaigns for success. This is where organization is like a key factor. And this is, again, where it's nice for you to dive in with whoever's running your campaigns and take a look. If you've got an actual campaign area that's just a mess and you can't sort of intuitively sort out what's going on, or the PPC manager can't walk you through sort of how they're thinking about building these campaigns, then it's probably not going to run effectively, right? Especially as you get more complex and you have larger budgets. This campaign management and how these things are set up so that you can continue to optimize, you can continue to sort of see what's working and what's not working. Organization is going to be super critical. So you want to make sure that you're setting up your parameters, your budget and bidding strategies are sort of well understood and intentional. Your ad creative and landing pages, you should constantly sort of be looking at this and testing this, both on the ad creative itself by throwing in some additional tests from time to time, and your landing pages using those KPI numbers. Like I said, click-through rates, sort of test your ads, 5% or so. Conversion rates on the landing page, 10% or so, right? Anytime those start to sort of go out of whack or potentially trend, super green, right? You're going way over 5%, or your conversions on your landing page is way over 10%, then again, those are worth looking at too, because there's probably something to be learned there to either propagate to other campaigns, or potentially in some places, maybe you're spending too much for that, right? And there's a particular reason that those numbers get out of whack. So whether good or bad, you should sort of dig into those. Create goals and metrics. Again, it's really important for you hear me a lot talk about KPIs. Like that way I can quickly look at my dashboard or my campaigns and I can tell, hey, is this trending, in the neutral zone, or is something sort of moving out of left and right bounds, right? And so that'll give me a sense of kind of what I'm doing there. Having good organization, setting this up before you launch is going to help you sort of be able to scale and add budget to these campaigns and have a more linear success rate than having kind of these ups and downs and dramatics, having to throw everything away and rebuild and stuff like that. The other thing that's important along these lines as well is Google itself is starting to get a profile of you, and you're building reputation over time. So all of this history that's run in these campaigns is super critical to ongoing success. So the more history, the more data, the longer you've been running campaigns with Google, the more consistent you've been running campaigns with Google, not turning them on and off, because you're stretching yourself on budget. Like if you don't have enough budget to run sustained campaigns, then potentially you PPC is not the sort of the place to start, right? Because you do want that consistency, because all of that will play into improving your reputation, giving Google a clear understanding of your profile, understanding what you think is successful, and will actually feed you more of that. So you'll see your cost going down, you'll see your success and quality going up. All those sort of play into this. The other thing I will say, just kind of from a strategic standpoint, if you're working with an agency or a PPC manager, make sure that you're using your Google ad account. Do not use a proprietary account. Do not use the agency's account or something else, because if for whatever reason you separate from that relationship, if you're not using and you don't control your own account, you're literally throwing away all of that investment that you've made, all of that history, and you will start as if you've never advertised with Google before with that new agency. So make sure that you're always building that asset inside of your Google Ads account. Oversight and communication. So again, in here, I've kind of laid in what we do as Kaleido, but these are best practices. So whoever the agency is, whoever the PPC manager is, oversight and communication is critical. Do not just hand the keys to somebody and hand them thousands of dollars, because ultimately they will disappoint. Even if they're a good agency and a good PPC manager, there's a good chance that if you're not communicating and you're not paying attention, your campaigns will get out of whack, right? Because of a lack of communication, because of a lack of understanding of your domain, because the market has moved on you and you didn't inform the PPC manager. Your PPC manager is not watching rates. Your PPC manager is not watching your residency rates. Your PPC manager is not understanding that you just opened a brand new memory care facility in a new city, right? So this communication becomes critical, because even the best of PPC managers and agencies, if you're not communicating with them, will invariably get out of sync with your business, and that will impact your budgets, your success rate, your lead production, all those sorts of things. So here's kind of that rhythm, right? That PPC manager should be in that account on a daily basis. They should be looking at it. They don't necessarily need to make changes all the time, because this is like any sort of marketing. It's really useful to let things run for a bit so you can gather enough data to make good decisions. So they don't necessarily need to be tweaking and changing. You don't need to see a bunch of changes on there on a daily basis. In fact, that's probably a negative thing, but they should be paying attention on a daily basis. They should be looking at that. You should have a primary feed for you to have insight into that through your Google Analytics. So those things should be hooked up. You should be, running some goals and tracking those successes as well. The actual account manager, or you as managing the overall marketing for your particular organization, whoever that person is, should be meeting with that PPC manager or that account manager on a weekly basis. Again, making sure that you're in sync with the business, making sure just a quick check to make sure that the campaigns are performing, nothing's gone out of whack. You haven't, from time to time, again, depending on what you're doing and what industries, Google sometimes, for unexplained reasons, will actually shut down or pause campaigns. or a campaign will get stuck because of budget or because of keyword matching or match types and stuff like that. So on a weekly basis, you should be talking about what's happening in your business. Anecdotal feedback from sales is great. What they're seeing on the leads, the conversations they're having, those sorts of things. And then on a monthly and a quarterly basis, you should be looking specifically at your dashboards, your KPIs, your measurements, and making sure that everything is in sync with one, what you need to get from advertising in order to make a profit, right? You're getting leads that are closing. You're getting a positive return on your ad spend. You're making sure that the actual leads and where you're actually advertising is consistent with the type of business that you're trying to build, right? The types of programs or products that you're trying to sell, your overall objectives as far as revenue and those sorts of things. So making sure that on a quarterly, monthly, so you kind of should have this rhythm where, again, your expectation, you're paying a manager, a management fee, they should be in there on a daily basis. On a weekly basis, you should be able to ping them and get sort of a high level understanding that things are kind of on track. And then monthly and quarterly, you kind of diving in deep on there. This kind of note on the side, we're talking about AI and algorithms to sort of address that. But this is really important too in this communication, because sometimes, and this has changed a lot. We've even run into this with clients. Like they've got an old understanding of Google Ads and PPC and how it ran. And things have radically changed, right? Google is forcing us to rely more and more on their algorithm and their AI. And so sometimes you'll see an ad and you'll say, like, I don't want, that headline and this thing, we should be optimizing that link and the link text. A lot of those things are, we providing sort of copy into the algorithm, and then they're sort of mixing, matching those, right? So you don't have some of that control. So that's important to understand too. Your PPC manager is not trying to frustrate you, but there are some things that either from their expertise, they would like to turn over to the Google algorithm, and to let it work. Or there are some things that we don't have the levers anymore, right? Because Google's taken them away from us. So, and that will probably continue to evolve, right? So understand that those search algorithms and AI is becoming more and more important. Performance and optimization, again, we've kind of blended in a lot of these concepts, but just to kind of reiterate, what should we be paying attention to, right? So the overall monitoring and optimization of the actual bidding strategies, the links, the clicks, the leads, and those sorts of things. There's a monitoring and optimization inside of that Google Ads platform or any sort of PPC platform. And then there's also, and we'll kind of talk about this towards the end, but kind of blended in, when we're talking about lead conversions or we're talking about conversions into leads, there's this component of ad creative and landing pages and those sorts of things as well. So there's kind of two monitoring and optimization actions happening here on the platform and on your destination, most probably your website. Budget. Make sure that you have a good understanding of budget. You've worked a spreadsheet. You say, hey, I'm going to put this kind of budget into this marketing channel, and I expect based on the KPIs, and this is, again, where the agency and the PPC manager is going to help you with some rules of thumbs around those KPIs. You should back into the numbers. You should say, hey, if I give this kind of budget, my expectation is I will get this number of leads for my sales team, and have everybody sort of agree, yes, that's about what we should expect. And then you're going to use that to monitor, right? So if you increase the budget, again, you should have expectations. A lot of times when we increase the budget, the actual cost for the leads will go up for a little bit, and then they'll normalize, and then you'll start to get more leads. So there's almost a two-step sort of thing that happens with budget. So really having a good open conversation about what budget does and what you can expect when you add or subtract from budget is really important, and that will continue to optimize you. Sometimes there's times where you just have to constrain budget for a variety of different reasons. Just have a good open conversation of what you can expect the effect on the campaign. You can never reduce budget and then all of a sudden get a lot more leads, right? So there is a direct correlation. So make sure that you're having a good conversation around that. Constantly be analyzing those key points of inflection and influence, right? Looking at the click-through rate. I can influence that with keyword selection. I can influence that with my keyword, matching strategy. I can influence that with my advertising, copy, and creative, right? Looking at my cost per click, I can influence that by where I am in the market and how competitive those terms are. And sometimes those things will change, right? If I have a big, again, this is something you should be talking about and people should be paying attention to. Sometimes you'll have a big competitor come into that marketplace and it'll completely change the dynamics and you have to adjust to it. Sometimes you'll have a big player leave the marketplace, or maybe a couple leave the marketplace. We've seen this as particularly in the mortgage industry, where players have moved out and then all of a sudden, we get a cheaper cost per lead. And again, the dynamics could be different, but it will change the dynamics of the marketplace. So again, you can't set and forget these things because it is a marketplace. It is dynamically shifting based on who's in there, what they're bidding. Sometimes, and I've seen this before, you'll get a large player that doesn't know anything about this. They'll dump tons of money. They'll blow the marketplace up for a period of time. And then you have to adjust to that, right? Lead form completion, again, that's super critical. What's happening on that page, how you're actually collecting the lead is super critical. Keywords, we've talked about that, the importance of match types, negative, and then ad creative and landing pages kind of goes. You can see on the right here, or at least, my right, the blue section here, these are some of our benchmarks. You should, at the minimum, have these 4 benchmarks in your brain. Landing pages. Again, we weren't going to go too deep into this. I want to open it up for questions. Robin, do we have some questions queued up?
Yes, we did have 2 questions before we get into the landing page
Okay.
part. Um, so one is, when you do a test, how long should you let it run before you say it's working or it doesn't work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that tends to sort of depend, again, this is a marketplace. So depending on what you're testing, if you're trying to get, an improved sort of, maybe you're adding some keywords and you want to test those, or you're trying to optimize the keyword match types. So there's a variety of different things you can test on the platform. There's a variety of different things you can test on the landing page and the conversion piece. What I would suggest is generally, one, have a good discussion. Like, how long can we test this? If I'm adding budget in order to do this test, or I've got like a real problem that I'm trying to solve, you may have a tighter time frame to test. And so you can change the way you can test, right? You can give it more budget to test faster. You can sort of do it so there's a lot of different variables here. But my kind of short answer is test until you get some significant feedback, right? So you test. If you run a test and you run that for a week or a couple of weeks and nothing changes, then there's something wrong with the test, right? So the kind of the shortest, best answer is when you're doing those weekly check-ins, look closely at that test. And the moment you get significant feedback, positive or negative, like call that test done and then make your adjustment to the test. And then the other critical thing to that is make sure you're only testing like one thing at a time. If that's not always possible, but try to limit the number of sort of factors that you're introducing into the black box. But generally, you can generally see some impact, some significance in a week or two, depending on how much budget you're spending. And that is a factor, right? And how fast you're generating data is a function of how much spend that you're doing. But usually a couple weeks you can start to see some significance, and then you can make some decisions on whether you want to extend that test, you want to change the parameters, those sorts of things. So hopefully that's a direct enough answer.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Similarly, we have a question. This person has been told that it's not a good idea to pause something when you're trying something new and you're trying to analyze. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why
Yeah.
you wouldn't
Yeah.
advise pausing a test or a program if there's uncertainty?
Yeah, so this probably bears a little more context, but I'll try to answer it in a couple of the different scenarios that I've run into. One of the most common reasons people pause pause and start is because they're constrained by budget. And as a result, like, you really have to think, you don't want to spend your last dollar on PPC. There are probably some other things that are maybe not as productive, or maybe it takes a little bit longer, but just by the nature of you having a more constrained budget, it doesn't make sense for you to be in this channel. And so where people oftentimes hurt themselves is, I can only spend $500. I spend $500 and it either stalls out the campaign. This is a really common scenario, right? You just don't have enough budget to be in the marketplace. Google is literally only going to feed you till your budget, spends, and then it pauses just on its own, right? So you can't actually be in the marketplace all day. You can't be in the marketplace all week. You can't be in the marketplace all month. If you don't have enough budget to do that, this is probably not the channel that I would pick, because that's just going to artificially pause you. The other places where people will sort of, hey, I think I can spend a few $1,000, which is fine. Our minimum's 2,500, right? You can get in the marketplace, you can sustain it, but that was a little bit more than you really could commit to. And then you have to pause everything and pull out because it just feels uncomfortable, right? It just feels uncomfortable. You can't run it, for a few months at $2,500. So again, probably not the right place, because when you pause, every time you pause a campaign, you're essentially going to start a little bit flat-footed. Now, you will have some history if you're using your Google ads, so that's good. But if you're starting and stopping, like, Google is looking at that consistency. And if you're starting and stopping, you're in and out of the marketplace, then when it goes to insert your ad the next time, you won't be in a preferential position to kind of get the best positioning. So again, this gets a little bit complicated, but ultimately, what happens when you're starting and stopping campaigns is you're breaking that history, and you're breaking the algorithm's understanding of you. So generally, yes, it is a bad idea to sort of pause out things. However, okay, so that's the budget constraint. That's the probably 90% of what I see is people getting into the marketplace where they simply do not have, and this is not anything to be embarrassed about. We all start businesses small and we are budget constrained, or a market forces us to be budget constrained. There are times when this is not the right channel, right? And so 90% of the time you're pausing because, like, you're in the channel and you just can't endure it, right? And so, because it does take some time for this stuff to work, even though you're going to get leads. The second thing that I've seen, and this is a good time to do it, if for whatever reason you're getting some feedback that says, hey, these leads with this keyword strategy or matching, and again, you should have this built into your Google Analytics so you can see it, right? This particular keyword is not producing what I expected. It's giving my salesperson a really hard lead to convert. It's giving my salesperson people looking for something that, like, is counterintuitive to what we thought that keyword would be looking for. And so then yes, you should go ahead and pause those. And pausing sometimes is the right thing to do, because sometimes those marketplaces change, right? The other place you might pause, and I kind of mentioned this, is if somebody, and this happens from time to time, it's unusual, but it does happen. If something erratic is happening in a particular part of the marketplace or a particular keyword area, that all of a sudden, like, the whole marketplace dynamic has changed, cost per clicks have gotten out of whack, conversion rates have gotten out of whack, or whatever, it may make sense to pause that, and try to let that sort of flow through the system, or try to figure out what's going on. So in those cases where there is actually a negative impact to what you're trying to accomplish, then absolutely pause. And I do encourage pausing, because that gives you the ability to test by just bringing them back online, right? You don't have to rebuild them. Don't delete the campaigns, just pause them out. Maybe you'll come back to them. Maybe products change. This is especially like mortgage. We do a lot of mortgage, right? So I'm gonna use some of these examples. Loan programs come in and out of the marketplace depending on what's happening in the market, right? So we could have some campaigns that we ran for HELOCs a decade ago. This is probably not a good example, but or ARMs or something that then went out of vogue in the market, and we would pause them because we don't want those, right? Because they're not profitable, but we could bring them back. So a couple different scenarios where pausing makes sense, but for the most part, if you're getting positive results and you have the budget, you don't want to be turning these things on and off.
Great. Thank you, Bill. No, any other questions at this time, or we can keep going and
Okay.
keep sending them our way?
Okay. Well, we'll still probably have about 5 minutes at the end, but I do want to touch on landing pages because landing pages are really important. And so we've got to give you some loose interpretations here. Generally, the most important thing you can do for your landing page is as high as possible. Get that form and that phone number, right? Get that. And generally, this is probably a bad depiction here, but this kind of looks like a traditional web form. We encourage the use of what I call a progressive survey style form. We're asking one question at a time. Works really good on a mobile phone, which is where most of these leads are coming from. You're just asking one question. You're not making an essay, question. You're just asking them sort of yes or no, or a selection of choices, and they're just making choices, and then that's collecting data. That needs to be as high, or the phone number as high on the page as possible. And the reason for this, again, is something a lot of people don't think about, particularly in search PPC. This is not exactly the same in Facebook ads and Facebook PPC, but in the context of Google search, in particular, they have typed in a keyword. And so when they arrive at this page, 70%, there's been some studies on this, about 70% of those people have already made the decision to engage with a provider of the product, right? They want to buy, or they want to fill out a lead, or they want to talk to someone who can give them a rate, right? Don't make them, I see this mistake all the time, where we feel like, oh, we have to explain the product and we have to encourage them, and we're moving down the page, and the actual call to action, the actual lead generation portion, all the way down here at the bottom. Just by moving that all the way to the top and understanding that most of these people are ready to take an action and ready to give you themselves as a lead, will putting it down here versus putting it up here, this is a 10x. We've tested this over and over again. You'll get 10 times as many leads just by moving that to the top. I do support not kind of doing the classic squeeze page. I do want to give them information, right? Because a lot of times, hey, I want to actually buy or get information about this product, but I want to make sure that I trust and I'm going through a legitimate provider. That's what the scroll gives you. And particularly on a mobile phone, you probably do it yourself. You'll hit the page, you'll scroll all the way, you'll flip your thumb, you'll scroll all the way to the bottom, get a quick survey of the whole page, and then you'll come back at the top and you'll take an action. We see that all the time on things like Hotjar and when we're doing heat maps and stuff like that. So give them some additional information to build trust, to validate your credibility, give them a little bit of information about what the process is going to be. All of that is great supporting material as they quickly scroll down the page. And then, of course, all your compliance and stuff that needs to be in the footer. And sometimes you can see, I also like to put a second bite at the apple in these landing pages. Works the same thing with content pages as well. Again, giving them the ability, sort of the call to action right off the bat. Even if you're talking content or SEO or blog post, you still want to do that. Give them some other opportunities to convert as they're moving down the page, just in case they kind of get stalled out or something really hits them just right. And then again at the bottom. So that's a good way to construct landing pages. When we're testing, again, we can variable. This right here is a good test when you're like opening up, right? You've got a new loan program, or you've got a new care facility opening or whatever, and you want to test. Having sort of radically different pages is okay. Once I've actually got something that's working, my changes are going to be more incremental, right? So I might change how I'm doing the form and might only change this portion right here, or I might use this page and leave it all the same but introduce a video, right, or something like that. So when I'm opening up to just figure out what my champion is going to be, we can have radically different. Once I've actually got something working, I'm spending some money, and I've got some good results, and I'm just trying to make it better, then I'm only changing one thing at a time, even on my landing pages. All right, a couple of little clarifications, and we'll open it to questions to kind of balance out the session. Important things to understand. So paid search is the actual introducing of the advertising inside of the search. Within Google Ads, you also have the ability to run display ads, or most commonly you think about or talk about remarketing. What this does is it actually puts that display, that image, those display ads, it injects them out into their network. So you'll see like major sites like Yahoo and those sorts of things. You'll see like little picture ads and stuff like that, or you'll go to buy an item on Amazon and that item will follow you all over the web, right? That's an example of sort of remarketing, and Google has the ability to sort of inject that. So if they've touched your page, your landing page, your website, we can also build up a remarketing community or group that we can sort of feed display ads out on here. So these work together. You should always be doing remarketing along with paid search. Geo-targeting, this is also a common sort of misunderstanding. Geo-targeting is something that we can do inside of Google Ads. Again, we're framing down on a particular geographic location, which has all kinds of great benefits to doing that. And there's a lot of different strategies on why you would do that. Geo-fencing is a little bit different, and that actually it often works with display ads. Geo-fencing is different, right? It's putting sort of a virtual border around a geographic location, and then as people sort of move in and out of that, then we're actually triggering that ad, that display. And so again, a lot of there's a lot more detail to that, but that's a factor of the mobile device, right? So generally, when we're doing Google Ads and pay-per-click, we're talking about paid search. We're doing remarketing with display. We're doing geo-targeting, geo-fencing, kind of a different animal, but can be highly effective. All right, you're going to get this, again, I won't go through all these sort of search terms, but it does have its own language. It's important if you're going to have conversations, you're going to use this strategically to kind of understand this language. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions for the last couple of minutes here.
Yeah, so we got a really nice softball question here of when you're looking at PPC and agencies, what questions should you ask? What should you be looking for?
Yeah. So one, you need some reason. I mean, you're going to hand two things over. You're going to hand the keys to your account, right? Which you have a lot of control over that. So that's not terribly dangerous, right? But you're going to hand them a lot of money, right? So one thing right off the bat on any sort of discovery is I would sort of take note of the type of discussion that you're having, right? Are they trying to seek to understand your business? Are they trying to seek to understand what a lead looks like or how a lead is going to be handled once you give them to them? Are they able to answer questions about expectations? One of the things that I hear a lot of people shy away from when they're selling PPC services is when somebody says, how many leads am I going to get? Right? You should be able to talk through some reasonable numbers, because you being on the other side of, let's say, a sales conversation, you're trying to build a business plan and you're trying to figure out like, okay, if I give you $5,000, and am I going to make $15,000? Am I going to make $100,000, right? So there should be a spreadsheet involved here, and whoever you're talking with should be able to talk intelligently to you about numbers and expectations. That also goes to kind of the next factor that I think you should be looking for is there are a lot of people who are just crack at, Google Ads and PPC. They're excellent at that skill set. But if they haven't operated inside of your domain, inside of your industry, you're going to be working at a disadvantage. And it is somewhat like hiring an amateur, or a junior contractor, and you're going to pay for their education, right? And so if you can find somebody who has generated and has run PPC campaigns inside of your marketplace, that's going to be better, because they're going to be able to get in there. They're going to be better to be effective with that first dollar, right off the bat, versus you having to spend 3 months and thousands of dollars for them to get up to speed on the marketplace that you're targeting. I hear a lot of people making the false dichotomy against saying, hey, well, I don't want to compete against myself. The fact of the matter is all of these marketplaces are so broad. Even if I'm handling 10, 20, 30 lending clients. I'm not with PPC. I've never seen this where we're generally directly competing, because the loan programs are different, the geos are different, the way that you're going about your lending is different. So no matter what the industry is, you want an expert that's been in that industry, been in that domain, been in that marketplace, because again, they're going to be as effective with your first dollar as they are with, dollar 10,000, right? Whereas if you go with just a really good PPC manager who's never operated in your domain, you're going to blow the first $10,000 in the first 3 months while they're learning, right? And no matter how good they are, you're going to have some waste in there, right?
Thank you, Bill. We have time for this last question, which is about quality scores and how important they are in PPC.
Yeah. So quality score kind of goes to, that reputation, but there are a lot of factors. So interestingly enough, quality scores are kind of like domain ratings in SEO, or domain scores, and so they're a little bit kind of fuzzy, as to kind of what they are. So you should be trying to get, as high a quality score as you can, but don't expect to sort of max out that quality score, right? Because there's a lot of factors that are going into play. Some of it is factors just on the platform and the algorithm and how you're performing when they do place you inside of a search, when they do place you inside of certain keyword marketplaces. So some of that has to do with, okay, what is the performance of you as an advertiser? That goes into play. To some degree, you want to kind of take almost a sideward glance at that and just say, okay, like, am I kind of getting into competition, right? So I don't need to be, I don't need to max it out, but I just want to kind of make sure that I'm in the ballpark. And then the other piece is on your actual page, right? Making sure that page, again, is creating that consistency, which is really important. Consistency of what the searcher is expecting from that keyword that they put in versus the advertising that they're seeing. That'll kind of go to your performance on the platform. And then ultimately, what do they see on the landing page, and whether or not that fits, all of those expectations cleanly. The quality score is like a really high level number of all of those factors kind of fitting together. So generally, again, I use it as just kind of like a sideward glance. But what I really want to focus on is making sure that that consistency and the outcome is footing all the way through. So it's better for me, at least in my philosophy, to look at those incremental numbers. I want to look through, hey, is my ad performing? Am I getting a good click-through rate? Am I getting a good position? Am I paying a good price? Am I paying a competitive, price in here? Am I getting a good conversion rate? Ultimately, am I converting into my product and making money, right? So all of those sort of individual numbers and features and circumstances kind of are all summarized a little bit in quality score. So I wouldn't get, I guess the short answer is I wouldn't get overly focused on it, and I would just kind of keep my eye on it just to make sure I'm not way out of bounds, but I would not drive a lot of my strategy based on what that number is.
Great. Well, thank you, Bill. Again, everyone is going to get the summary slides as well as the recording. If they want to get in touch with you, Bill, to ask more questions, great.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah. So I'll leave this on here. You'll obviously see it in the video. You can contact me anytime. Email is obviously the best, but I do put my phone number on here. Super open to hearing from you guys, answering questions. If there's other topics, we're going to make this a regular thing. So I'd love that kind of feedback too. Or if you have, again, specific contextual questions about what you're doing or what you're thinking about doing, I'm happy to have those discussions as well. So that contact information, feel free to use that as you will.
Okay, and with this, we'll say have a great afternoon and thank you all for spending the time with us today. Hope you found it enlightening and productive.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.